Cannabis. Today we're diving into the industry with Gregg Steinberg, who ran a cannabis business for the last 10, 15 years. Now, we will talk about the obvious things, the usage and drugs and the whole thing, but actually we're diving deep. We're going into one of the most challenging industries in the world today. Why is it so challenging? Because you have to deal with government issues, with regulation, with marketing. It sounds very sexy. It sounds very exciting to be in the cannabis industry, but in reality, it's a very difficult industry. And today we're doing a deep dive with a real expert. You're going to have fun with it either way. Hey, Gregg, thanks for being here.
Boaz, great to see you. Always wonderful to see your smiling face.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. Why cannabis?
Why not?
Okay, good. Why Gregg in cannabis? How about that?
That's a great question. So back in 2012, when cannabis was first legalized in the States, Colorado was the first state, went adult use. Let me back up a little bit. I'd spent most of my career in an advisory capacity, working with early stage companies, mid stage companies, helping to achieve their goals. Started my life as an investment banker, and I guess in some ways similarly, right, trying to help other people achieve their goals. And in the early 2000s, I was spending most of my time working with founders, entrepreneurs, visionaries.
Was it in a specific field? Was it healthcare, or was it what or whatever technology? What's the field you specialize in?
It was fairly industry agnostic. I did a lot of stuff in technology and healthcare and early family businesses. What I've found that I can bring to the table is I've got a little bit of gray hair and a little bit of experience. I'm not typically the visionary, but I put myself around the table with those that are. I can help them miss a few potholes and a few landmines. And
so, are you more of a technocrat in a good way? Like, are you more like your infrastructure systems? Is that your strength?
Operations, strategy, trying to figure out how to exit before one enters to make sure that there's a pathway to do that, and try and find a pathway to do that, right?
Yeah. So let me just pause for a second, because we're gonna go into it, but I'm surprised, amazed that you took on cannabis, because cannabis it's like you said, it's 2012. You said the legalization only in one state, right? And maybe medical was
medical
early.
in a few, it was medical in a few places, California, Colorado, a few other places, way back.
It's a brand new market, right? A brand new, let's say brand new chapter in this very old, what do you call medicine, entertainment, whatever you want to call it. So it's chaotic, it's crazy. And then you just pointed to the fact that you're more of a system, seeing what's how to avoid the potholes. You go into this chaotic industry. Walk me through it.
For sure. So it's before I got into it, I'd spent some time in Israel, actually, trying to start an incubator, working with early stage founders, visionaries, all around things that had a positive impact on either the planet or on human life. Water tech, clean tech, ag tech, health tech, looking at very early stage technologies and trying to identify ways to help the scientists or the founders or the entrepreneurs commercialize those projects and those technologies. The cannabis piece sort of came through that same pathway with a few YPOers, actually.
We started YPO, just people don't know, it's Young President Organization. It's a global network of CEOs and founders who support each other. Yeah.
Right. So with a couple of YPOers from around the U.S., we started a very early stage fund to venture capital fund, a seed fund, really, to invest in early stage pre-commercialized technologies that were sitting on college campuses. In fact, had been started through grant money coming from one of the U.S. government institutions.
Like incubators.
I can
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And we with the investment thesis to find commercializable technologies in potentially rapidly growing industries that would have an impact in some positive way. Could be planet, could be people, rather, right? And so the first technology that we invested in happened to be a piece of agricultural technology sitting at Colorado State University that had been funded by a government grant and through the National Science Foundation to look at sustainable agriculture. And the early
So,
work was
so go ahead. So, but sorry, so you got into cannabis through the agriculture perspective. You okay?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we looked at this technology, and it was using organic, microbial, biological, existing biology microbes in soil to figure out how to find a way to maximize crop yields and crop health and replace synthetic or augment synthetic fertilizers, as an example.
Okay. So
Um,
okay. Let me pause because it's getting technical here, and um, so it's funny, right? I have this. I'm sure I know it's changing, but I have this image, right? I'm thinking cannabis. I'm thinking CBD. I was expecting. I know you, but I was expecting you to, dreadlock and like hippie kind of looking. At your age, it's more hippie. Maybe it's younger. It's more like the rappers and everything. And now you're getting on a session with us, virtual session, and you dress like a corporate person. You have white hair, right? So, and maybe you dressed up for us, but did you bring a more corporate structure to a very kind of into the jungle? Is beyond the startup you were involved with? I mean, walk me through that bridge for a second.
yeah, yeah, and I think this was the transition of the whether it's the stigma or the expectation of Birkenstocks and tie dye and puka bees, right?
Yeah,
Sitting on the beach, watching the stars,
yeah,
versus where the industry sort of transformed to, right? I think it's corporate in many ways, and that transition started in the early 2000 and teens. And this company was very similar, right? It was done to work with traditional agriculture, corn, wheat, soya, etc. And we ended up pivoting because there was an opportunity, the early green rush, if you will, in,
yeah.
in cannabis. And we saw this across many sectors where traditional industry is being impacted. One, because of the margins available in cannabis in the early days don't exist now, but the margins that existed in the early
So
days
okay,
and the innovation that came because of that.
so explain to me the margins. Why? Because cannabis was never expensive. Even when it was illegal, it was one of the cheapest drugs out there, right?
Right,
I think it's
right,
not fair to
right.
call drugs every drug, but it's not. My college days, it's not that expensive to get high on cannabis. No matter you can find. So, so why was the margin? Why did it look like the margin is going to be very high there?
Yeah, I think let's go back to agriculture as an example because ultimately it's an agricultural product, right? It's a plant, it grows, it's agriculture. Um, it just doesn't have the same viewpoint as a strawberry or
Yeah.
wheat, right? So, um, but as we take traditional commodity crops, and at some point, cannabis will be there as a commodity crop when it federally legalizes in the states. It is commodity crop in other countries. Um, but in the early days, it was selling for $3,000 or $4,000 a pound, and you can grow a pound of wheat off of a couple of plants,
Mm.
and you can get a couple $100 an acre off of wheat. So if you're radically different in terms of when you think about it, how do you use land or how do you use space in a greenhouse, and what kind of returns does that offer per square foot, as an example, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because of that, there was a lot of money flowing into innovation to figure out how to maximize yield, maximize health. It's medicine. There's requirements in cannabis that don't exist in other agricultural products in terms of lab testing and not able to use certain pesticides, insecticides, fungicides that
Yeah.
we find used traditionally in traditional agriculture, fruits and vegetables that you can't use in cannabis. So there had to be innovation to figure out how to grow this product, right? Effectively, efficiently, cleanly. And so,
Okay, so again, I'm going to keep on stopping because I think there's such, I mean, we can literally go a million ways in this conversation. I want to understand. So you just said that it's basically agriculture, innovative, et cetera, it's agriculture. When there was, and maybe I'm, because I don't know the industry at all, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that in the, like about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, there was this huge rush into, there was like money being like spilled over this industry like crazy, as if it's the next tech boom, right?
right.
So, but no one goes and invests in a brand new kind of strawberries, that much money, right? So walk us through, let's take a step back, okay? Why was funds, investors, were so excited, and what was the dream? Either you, if you were if you raised money, or you as an investor, what was the dream you saw that was different than just developing a brand new kind of berries or fruit?
Yeah. Let's think about 100 years ago, thereabouts in the in the States during Prohibition with alcohol, right? And if we draw a correlation between alcohol and cannabis as an example, right? So during Prohibition, how many people were out there making bathtub gin and making it in the hills, right?
Yeah.
And now
And
let's
by
look
the
forward, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah,
but
but by the way, one of the reasons it's regulated, but also it's legal, is because so many people died from poisoning, not because alcohol was killing them, but actually people were making it in their own basement, and there was no regulation on it. So so was it the same? Cannabis never
very
killed
similar,
someone,
right? Right. I
but
mean,
yeah, I
it
guess so.
doesn't, it it doesn't as a plant by itself. But look at what's going on with fentanyl these days
Yes.
and things that are getting laced, and people are dying when they're consuming something that's laced with something that isn't the actual plant
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
right? So we see
Yeah.
that. So what about or with certain type of pesticides or insecticides or fungicides that are used that have a negative impact in terms of our health, right? Cancerous and other types of things, right? So legalizing it puts requirements on it that it has to be grown a certain way, and it's tested, and it's in a legal shop, that it's not laced with something, right? So it's very similar to those early days of the transition of alcohol from prohibition to a legal market. The transition, which we're not there yet, of cannabis from similarly illegal prohibition to a legal market, that has all the guardrails around it. And what's won in the alcohol piece? It's not the person growing the rye or the oats or the hops for the most part. They're farmers, right? But those are the
Yeah.
inputs into the products. Um, what's won is brands,
Yes, it's the
right?
marketing. Exactly.
It's the
And
marketing, it's
I
the
mean,
brands,
vodka
right?
is the best example. Vodka has no flavors, nothing. And then you have like, Grey Goose versus,
Right.
Tito versus like, yeah, it's all
Exactly,
marketing.
right.
Yeah.
And and many of the brands, whether it's in liquor or in various food products, they own the supply chain,
What do
right?
you mean? Explain to me.
Well, let's think about you know, a tequila brand, right? Do they own the agave field, or they own it to the extent that they've got farmers under contract that are exclusively supplying that agave to that brand? Or in wine, you've got exclusive growers for grapes that are producing for, right? They own the supply chain, ultimately about a brand on the shelf. No different in cannabis, right? You've got to own the supply chain if you want to have a brand that's got consistency, that's got quality, that meets whatever your brand vision and mission and marketing is that you're putting out there. You have to have a supply chain that does that. So in the early days of cannabis, when brands weren't established, what was the way to start it? It was by owning the supply chain, and the supply chain meant you were the cultivator. You built the cultivation facilities, in order to grow it, um, where you had quality and consistency to it, and because of the regulatory environment around the testing and the lab requirements, it's very difficult to grow that outdoors and meet all of the regulatory pieces of it. Grow great weed outdoors. Look, it's been going on in California and Oregon for hundreds of years,
Yes.
but most of that stuff doesn't meet the regulatory requirements that we have today.
So was most of the excitement in the early stages of investment capital flowing into the industry was about the infrastructure, the logistics, and the marketing, or was it more about innovation around growing it?
Combination, right? So, yeah, there were two camps, and we've also seen this in many industries, right? Yeah, back in the gold rush days, was it the folks that actually had the gold, or was it the people providing the picks and shovels,
Yeah, the
right?
people who made money was the Levi's, the jeans makers and
Right,
the
right.
and the
So in
shovels.
many
Yeah, exactly.
ways,
Yeah.
it was the ancillary products where there was a lot of innovation that came out of. And this was, back to how we started the conversation. This agricultural company was through ancillary products. So in many ways, innovation that's come into the agricultural side, the growing side of the commodity, it's changed traditional agriculture in many ways. So like products like we had that were organic inputs to fertilizers that increase crop health, crop yield, um, etc. Um, Lighting, the transition from HPS lighting to LED lighting, and so much innovation that's taken place. Then all that lighting innovation that's now used across greenhouse industries, tomatoes, indoor grows, whatever, came out of cannabis because there was money there to do it. The same thing with technology and distribution channels and things
Yeah.
like this. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's. You said a few things that it's. So you said about quality and organic and et cetera, et cetera. How important is it for someone who's a cannabis user? I mean, look in I think alcohol is a good comparisons, but it's a very sophisticated, very large market, right? It's billions. I don't know what the numbers are, but the billions and billion dollars. Okay, so when one sees organic vodka, they might buy it because they think it's healthy. Let's just assume. When someone walks to a place to buy cannabis products, do they care about that? Do they care if it's organic or not? Do they care if it's
The organic piece, maybe not so much, depending on where you are in certain parts of Oregon and California, and
of course, California, they
Rhode
have to.
Island,
Everything
maybe.
has to be organic,
But
Yeah.
we'd have to segment or segment between true medical use and recreational use, right?
What's the percentage? How much of the industry goes to medical? How much used to recreational? Do you have a sense?
I mean, from a regulatory perspective, a lot goes to medical because a lot of states aren't adult use states yet. But medical's a pathway to get to adult use or
So it's not truly medical, just an excuse to
recreational.
you get those,
Right,
like
right.
California in the first days, you walk to the doctor next door, you say, I have a headache. He says, no problem. And he gives you the license to get medical. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a significant amount of the community that use the plants as medicine. I mean, we're all screaming inside in some way, right? Why do we have a drink? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's to calm the screaming a little bit, right? There's other things that people medicate with, and a lot of them aren't good, right? And the healthiest one in many ways is cannabis. It helps to calm the screaming, but it doesn't have all those negative impacts that we see with even alcohol.
Yeah,
opiates,
no one gets
obviously,
into a
dangerous,
bar
right?
fight punching each other on
That's right.
cannabis, but on alcohol. Okay, but there's a huge social element to alcohol, right? So we can go to a bar with friends and having drinks. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen "quote unquote" bars that serves cannabis. I mean, maybe one startup, someone trying to do it, but it's not like
they're out
you
there.
and I get together like, oh, let's go to the bar of the hotel and get a glass of scotch and drink it together and chat. You don't really do people don't really do cannabis.
No, I mean, it's been social for a long time. I mean, right? I mean, people sit in a circle and they pass a joint, right?
Yeah.
It's a very social plant from that perspective. Just because of the stigma, we don't go to a bar or a consumption club, although some consumption clubs do exist. But back to the question on the growing the plant cleanly or whatever it is.
Yeah, sorry.
If I'm a cancer patient, or I've got digestive issues, or I'm dealing with PTSD or pain or arthritis, or we can go through a long list of medical conditions where not enough research is being done because you can't do it in the states because of the federal environment. But there's enough research that's being done, and there's plenty of bodies of work out there that say cannabis has a positive impact on so many different diseases. Not that it's a cure,
Yeah.
but it certainly helps to enhance the quality of life on many things, right? So if I'm coming off of chemo and I'm trying to figure out how to stimulate my appetite, I'm trying to figure out how to reduce some of the pain, and rather than take an opiate, I'd rather take cannabis, which many patients do. Much healthier way to do it. My wife was actually an example of that from breast cancer. Is It's a medicine,
Yeah.
and you want to know that you're taking something that's clean as a medicine, just like a pharmaceutical that you're getting, off, at the pharmacy. You want to know that the medicine that you're buying at the pharmacy is also clean and healthy to put in your body. So don't go buy it at the street corner from whoever. But if you buy it in a dispensary, it's being tested, what's on it, what hasn't been used in terms of growing it, and it's a clean product, right?
Yeah.
And so from
Did
the
the did
purely
the
medical perspective, it's important. Yeah.
did the pharmaceutical try to take over this industry? Because I mean, if you speak with some people will tell you pharmaceuticals, one of the things they've done is they turn something that's been around for millions of years, used for thousands of years by humans, and put it in a pill and made fortune through it, right? And they took over some things that people experience over thousands of years being used. Was the same experience in cannabis, that pharmaceuticals said, okay, if we put in a pill and a guy with a white outfit, like with the name doctor on it, gives it to you, then you trust it. But if someone sells it to you on the street or in a store, then it's less. Was that this kind of back and forth with them? Are they still doing it? They're not doing it?
We haven't got there yet on the pharmaceutical companies because of the federal regulatory environment. And a lot of the pharmaceutical research comes out of ties to universities and research institutions. And that, a lot of that funding comes out of government agencies.
Explain to me, sorry. So you're saying that because of governmental issues, pharmacies do not invest in developing that drug? I mean, but they got heroin to be approved. I mean, heroin in a pill. I mean, the whole pandemic we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
So why? So is it because they don't see as much money as other painkillers, or because they have so much lobbying and abilities? If they really wanted to make cannabis, whatever the version, they would probably call it differently. It's going to come in a more clean pill-like or liquid-like. They would probably double down on it and work their magic.
Yeah. And I think we'll get there. There is an example at GW Pharmaceutical, which does have two FDA approved THC drugs for pediatric epilepsy, and it's highly successful. Those are the only two that have been approved so far. It was done outside of the States in terms of the development and the research. It was done in the UK. But I think that's a really good example. And epilepsy is another, it's a great way to be able to sort of explain this, because if I have pain, or I've got insomnia, or I have PTSD, or I'm trying to stimulate appetite, how do I really measure that? It's somewhat objective, right? But epilepsy is really easy. Either the kid has a seizure, or he or she doesn't, right? So if and this is what happened. You see children that are having seizures multiple times a day, hundreds of times a month, from small ones to major ones, to go to zero or very, very
Amazing.
few. It's very easy thing to track, right? And so they were able to get, GW was able to get this drug passed because, it was very easy to do it. And it was, not
Greg, why do you think the government is so against it? Is it
I
a
think-
cultural thing that alcohol? I mean, there's so many pictures of a president sitting in the, like they're having a glass of, whiskey or something in their hand. You don't see a president rolling and, Clinton never inhaled and the whole thing. It was like, is it a cultural thing? Why is it fighting so badly against it?
Our founding fathers were hemp farmers, so wasn't that it was
So
it
So
was
if they were more Jamaican, founding father, they will have a different relationship to it.
we have to go back to when when prohibition started on cannabis, right? It wasn't started because of the plant as medicine or as a drug. It was started because it really was a war against the African American community, and it was a way to try and quell things that were going on at the time, right?
And forgive my ignorance, why did African Americans use cannabis more than the white?
They not
Is
to
it
say
a
that
cultural
they did.
thing? Like, no, I'm just saying. But what's it similar? I'm not saying it is because again,
Yeah.
I'm not an historian, and for sure I don't know anything about that world. But I'm just asking a very simple, innocent question, right? So
Right.
if I take what you and I've read about it, that it really was a war against kind of suppressing the African Americans. Why was the cannabis associated with the African Americans versus with? Is it just association,
It was
or is
just
it
an
actually?
association thing. I
Yeah.
mean, there were plenty of people that look like you and me that were using it as well as a social as a social tool, right? Um, you can go back to when I'm older than you, but when I was a kid, right? Then we had all the Nancy Reagan, your brain on drugs, war
Yeah.
on right type of stuff that was going on, and that was focused. A lot of those kids in those TV commercials or posters looked like looked
Yeah.
like me when I was a kid,
Yeah.
right?
I think it was a
Uh,
low hanging fruit
yeah,
also because
for
cannabis is a
sure.
low hanging fruit. It's easy to arrest. It's easy to give. If you look at the New York, the Rockefeller laws, all those things, very easy to kind of process and catch
Right,
people
right. But I
using
mean,
it.
if
Yeah.
let's go back to your question on the pharmaceutical side. So we haven't seen the entry formally on the pharmaceutical side. Um, I'm sure that there's things that are going on behind the scenes. We have seen it on the alcohol side and the liquor company side. Many liquor companies, large alcohol companies and tobacco are in the space. They've invested in, they're participating in, they've got projects, they've got associations and
I mean, it
uh,
makes sense, right? They understand marketing.
collaborations,
They
whatever.
understand exactly, they understand that industry. And so they say, like, why don't we be early investors in that process, right? Yeah. But from your own career, you went the other direction. You don't deal with, as far as I understand, you don't deal with medical cannabis. You're actually dealing with marketing. I mean, the Belushi farms, So
Yeah.
you went a different direction. Is it because you understood that with all due respect to the agriculture, innovation, et cetera, there's actually a marketing and branding opportunity here?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that to the alcohol analogy, right? Is in the early days, the money got put into cultivation or into who were the picks and shovels, right? And we were one of the picks and shovels in the early days with that agricultural input. Couldn't do today what we did then. Um, Even though we're only 12 years old as an industry, from a legal industry from that perspective, from 0 to 55 billion or so, still a very small industry, but we've transitioned from sort of the innovation and the early days of those ancillary picks and shovel companies to they're now mainstream type of supply chain contributors. And as the industry's growing and the big public companies in the space have operations around a lot of the US, playing towards whenever it does go federally legal, that supply chain is going to, we're not going to be growing weed in a warehouse in New York in the middle of the winter or in Florida in the middle of the summer. It's just not economical, right? It's going to go back to traditional agricultural inputs. And so that transition then goes to brands and probably still the toll booth, which is the retail side of it,
Okay.
right?
So
Because right,
before we go there, and I do want to spend time there, I want to understand two things you said. And it's fascinating for me. You're saying it's a $55 billion a year industry, but it's still not legal federal, right? You still, can you actually walk in, if I sold, can I walk into a bank and deposit a check?
In
Uh,
some states.
in in some states. So some
Yeah,
states you can do
but
business,
yeah,
but for example, if you're a federal side or many states multi-state bank like Chase, you probably cannot do business, right? Yeah. So, but
yeah.
still 55 billion. So, are those companies? So let's look at that for a second. Are those companies just biting the bullet, saying eventually it will become legal, eventually, and then we're going to be there's like a barrel of entry. We'll be so advanced in the process. If someone only started then, we're going to be ahead of them. Is that kind of the thought they're having when they're building those industries?
Yeah, so there was actually a report that came out this morning, industry report, um, and the expectation is, with the assumption that we're federally legal at some point in the next 5, 6, whatever years, that assuming that takes place, that the 2035 industry size is 350 billion versus today's 55. So
Yeah. So if
that
someone says, "Look, we're 10 years from now," let's just round numbers. So 10 years from now, the industry is going to
6x.
just 5x, 6x. Therefore, I should be in this field. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
What does
exactly
it?
right.
What does need to happen on the federal level to get it legal? Is it more of a political, like there's enough Republicans? Because I would say Republicans have more of like the war on drugs image. Whether it's true or not, that's a different conversation because they might do cocaine, but but it's fine because they're wearing Wall Street suits. But is it more of the change in the conversation internally about the usage of it, and that's going to make it legal?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of change of perception, because the stigma's not there the way that it used to be. People don't die, off of consuming cannabis. There's no addiction component to it. I mean, some of these stigmas are in the process of changing. It takes political willpower, right? We've got a lot of things on the agendas in Washington these days, and there always is, and it's got to rise from being way down the list to up the list, right?
Well,
Um,
lobbying can help. How much money is
well,
invested in
lobbying
lobbying?
can help. There, the lobby in the industry is small compared to pharmaceutical lobby or the alcohol lobby or the tobacco lobby, all of which cannabis takes away from, right? Because it's people moving off of, and we've seen it. Alcohol consumption has come down
Yes.
as
Yeah.
cannabis legalization has come up, right? Um, Opiate addiction, and I think the stat currently is in every municipality where we see legalized cannabis through dispensaries, opiate addiction has come down by 25%, right?
Wow. Why is that
So
a replacement? It's not a replacement because they work very differently, right? Is that a replacement drugs or
in
is
some
cannabis
cases,
being used to help people come off heroin addiction
right, or other things, right?
or
And
other thing?
yeah, and
Yeah.
the reason, you mentioned Belushi, and we're focused 100% on the brand side of that, but what got Jim into the industry, in terms of thinking about it as a medicine, partially, his brother died of a drug overdose,
But not
um,
cannabis.
which, right,
But I'm saying not cannabis at
not
all.
cannabis. No, it was
But I'm saying when I kind of like deep dive into preparation for this conversation, I said it's interesting. I wanted to ask you about it, and so maybe we should pause for a second. It Belushi. I mean, he's famous. I mean, he's an actor himself, but also his brother was like iconic, right? For anyone who's probably, I would say, 45, 50 and older, like iconic character. We all know him from Blues Brothers and Saturday Night Live and the whole thing, right? But then his brother died from overdose, right? And then he associated a drug, even though they're not related, right? So it's an interesting choice to say, look, I'm selling you something that in a non-educated mind collapse to overall drugs. So your brother, who is famous, died from over. And then I said, like, it's interesting choice
right.
of
I mean,
yeah,
if Jim was here with us, he'd say,
yeah,
"Listen, if my brother was a pothead, he'd still be alive today."
of course, absolutely,
Right? And the early days of Jim getting in the business, we still do this today is we visit dispensaries all the time, and we meet with people, and a lot of people that come share their personal stories a lot around how it's impacted their life from a medicinal perspective. And in the early days, Jim was doing one of these visits. Walks in, says hi to the people. They're waiting in the line outside to get their 5 seconds or 10 seconds with him, take a picture or whatever. He's walking into the dispensary, shaking hands with the people. I'll see you inside. I'll see you inside. And there was a guy that was standing there, somewhat withdrawn, cold eyes, and looked at Jim in a way that made Jim stop and say to the guy, "Man, are you okay?" And he said, "Listen, I was in Afghanistan. I was a medic. I did 3 tours. I've seen things that no one should ever see happen to the human body. I came back, and I see my doctors at the VA, and they tell me I've got triple PTSD. I don't even know what that means, but I know I can't talk to my children. I can't have a relationship with my wife, and I can't sleep at night." And then he teared up, and he said, "Your Black Diamond OG, which is a strain that we have, is the only thing that's allowed me to talk to my children, have a relationship with my wife, and sleep at night."
Oh,
When I was diagnosed at the VA, they gave me a bottle when I left of 600 Oxycontin.
hmm.
I'm off that totally,
Yeah.
and I use cannabis. And that was sort of a pivotal moment where Jim understood, and Jim said, I get it, and they gave the guy a hug. He goes, "But I didn't make this stuff." And the guy said, "No, but you're a steward."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was sort of a pivotal moment. Said, this is not about the money grab and all that kind of stuff. It's really about the medicine, because many people, most people are using it for something, either to stop the screaming or to stop whatever medical issue that they're dealing with, right? Or to not to stop it because it's not a cure, but to at least ease the pain, right? And so, this is a core component of why we're in the business.
Okay. So sorry for pause, for kind of keep on asking that question. There's a gap for me here. This beautiful story you just told us about, and we understand that it can definitely help people dealing with all those problems with cancer or PTSD, etc. And then you have this refusal on the federal level to start even the process. Maybe they're doing it behind the scene, but no president candidate was saying, look, and one of the challenges, like Trump is of the generation, forget about what we think about it, good, bad, but he is in his 70s, late 70s. And he is of that generation that grew up with all drugs are the same. Actually, he lost his brother to alcohol.
Right.
So he's known for someone that doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, et cetera. So is it a generational thing? Do you think when we have president that he or she are 50 years old, they're going to be much more open, and that's going to open the space? I mean, why is this constant, why this block that your industry cannot go through it and make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and if we go back to Obama, it was clear that cannabis was not a stranger to him, and there's plenty
but he
of
didn't do
stories out
it,
there,
right?
But
I mean,
but there was no political will there to be able to, up on the Hill, to be able to push that agenda, right? And
so you think he would have signed off it, but it was,
I think he would have, yes.
Congress and the Senate was not, there was not political will.
It wasn't there, right?
Yeah.
And and we'll see what happens after this administration, and maybe there'll be the political will to do that. The tax money, as 55 billion grows to 100 billion and 150 billion, those
That's a lot of money.
those states that aren't legal. That's look at gambling, right? Why is gambling in so many more places now than it used to be? There's a lot of taxes, money around it, right?
Yeah, of course.
And the same thing here, right? So
okay, so how do you pay taxes? Not you, but I'm saying, how does in the industry, if you're growing something that is basically legal, you're growing it legally in New Jersey or in Oregon, how do you actually just explain to me how it works? How do you pay federal taxes? Are you more of are you a farmer? Doesn't matter what you're growing. Is that how it is?
I walk into a dispensary and I buy some, an eighth of flower in a dispensary, whatever that is, there's, depending on the state you're in, it's 12%, 14%, 25%,
But that's on the
30%
state level. But the
taxes.
federal, how do you pay
Right.
federal? I mean, does the federal government doesn't care? They take money even if it's coming from quote unquote illegal product,
Right.
as long as you
Right.
pay taxes.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
right. And so at the state level, the states are, the states have, have their sales tax infrastructure in place that are, significant. The state taxes, as an example, in Illinois, taken from cannabis last year, were double the amount of state taxes taken off of alcohol. There's a lot more bars and
Wow.
restaurants than there are dispensaries. So the tax rate's very high from that perspective.
Yeah.
On the federal side, which is part of why there was such a debate around rescheduling from to Schedule 3, which allows cannabis to be treated like a normal company from a federal tax perspective. Currently, um, you're not allowed to deduct, because it's a Schedule 1 drug, any normal operating expenses for the company. You can deduct your cost of goods costs, but your rent, your payrolls, your insurance, you can't deduct any of those. So the
Wow.
federal tax from that perspective is, even though it's illegal federally, it's still legally in the state. You have a business, you have to pay your federal taxes.
But your net revenues, net profits are smaller because a lot of things you cannot deduct on your federal
Yeah,
tax return.
exactly.
Wow.
Right. So I mean,
Okay.
your net profit's your net profit, but typically, you know, we're paying taxes on the bottom line. Here,
Yeah.
you're sort of paying taxes on your cost of, on your gross profit line versus your net profit line, right?
Yeah. Did it kill the illegal cannabis?
It's had the unintended consequence of keeping illegal, the legacy market, alive and well. You can't
Why?
bank.
Because it's cheaper?
You
Because of
can't bank
taxes?
it,
Oh, okay.
right? You've got these huge tax implications. You can't move stuff from one place to another efficiently or effectively, so there's no economies of scale.
Oh,
Um,
let
in
me
many
just
states, it's tough to buy it because you need to get medical cards and things like this.
medical.
So it's kept the legal market, the
So it's an
legacy market
illegal
alive.
market that tried to go legit. Now have to play by the rules of legit game, right? But still still competes with an illegal market. That's a very tough game, right?
Right, right. So the legacy market stays
Legacy
intact and
means
well.
illegal. Though when you say legacy, you mean
Right,
the illegal market. Yeah.
right. And because of also, you know, many states, you hopefully would have learned from other states that they made mistakes, but everybody does their own thing. Is, in many states they issued way too many licenses for people to grow legally.
Grow or sell, or is it different? Is it the same
Both,
thing? Okay.
both.
Because I can tell you in New York, you please explain to me. It's insane. There's more, sales kind of like bodega slash, tobacco store slash, on the block than liquor stores by far. I mean, every block. Do they make that much money that it's worth for the?
No. So what happened is,
Yeah,
here's two good examples, right? New York is one, Oklahoma would
yeah,
be another one as an example, or California, where they issued, like in Oklahoma, where they issued more than 5,000 licenses, 7,000 licenses in the state, but there's only so much of a population. So when you give the right to people to grow it, then there's not a population to buy it. What's going to happen to it, right? It's going to go someplace else, which means it's going to the legacy market, the illegal market, someplace
So
else.
when I walk into a place, let's say I want to walk in and buy gummies, whatever, is it legal or is it illegal? I mean, I don't know the product, but I'm saying, what's
Right,
your prediction? Like,
and if
if
you
I
walk
walk in
into
New
this,
York, I live in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, I walk in the street, and
yeah,
there's signs. It's not even hidden, There's signs and everything, and like you walk in and you say, I want whatever, vaping or something.
right.
And did they get that product on the shelf through the traditional illegal path or more your path, which is
It depends
regulated?
on whether it's a legally licensed dispensary
It's probably not. I mean, I
or
don't,
it's not. Good way to check
Yeah,
that is, do they check your license when you walk in the door, right?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And so what happened in New York? In New York, the state issued a bunch of licenses to people to grow legally, but they didn't issue licenses for the retail side to meet the supply
Supply.
needs of the demand that was getting that was provided based on the issue on the
And
licenses
and
they
you also
issued.
you can't take it across the border
Can't
to
take
other
it across the
states.
border, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what happened? You gave permission to all these people to grow, but there was no place for them to sell it. So all these bodegas popped up as places to buy, and because they were illegal, they weren't just buying stuff that was getting grown in New York. They were buying stuff from California and Oregon and Colorado. And
So the growers are okay. Let me walk me through it. The grower might be in New York. Okay, he or she gets a license. They're growing it, expecting the state to give licenses to sell it. Now, because of bureaucracy or whatever it is, there's not enough thing. So I have those piles of product that I've made. So do I go either I declare bankruptcy basically, or I go the illegal route and I sell it through the illegal channels because I have to get rid of what's in my barn.
differing ways. I mean, New
Yeah.
York is a very innovative, creative, entrepreneurial state, right?
Yes.
So you find ways to do things.
Yeah.
Now, what's happened, all these bodegas opened up, whatever. And now, it's being dialed back. The state got engaged. The regulatory side got engaged. Not all, but most of the bodegas have been shut down. The licenses got issued to the licensed dispensaries. Those have opened up, and now it's operating way more like a traditional market, Colorado, Oregon, whatever. That that you've
That's a
got that, you've got that.
that's a fascinating point because it shows you how complex the industry is in many ways because you have this good intention, right? You say, okay, I'm going to legalize something that's being used illegally. It's not like I'm bringing something. And then because of bureaucracy or because of politics, probably because mainly bureaucracy, just things takes longer. People get punished for taking the legal right. And one of the things I read is that if you build a dispensary in New York, I don't know other places, you have to also use, because of political pressure, et cetera, you have to use union scale employees. So when you build those shopping, this store to sell it, if I'm opening a place, I just bring 3 guys, contractors to do sheetrock and paint it and be done. I'll be opening it in $5,000. If you want to open one, it might cost you $50,000 because you have to go through all this. So again, it creates this. So it's about time. Do you think it's just about time will close the gap more and more, and the bureaucracy is going to catch up to it over time?
Yeah, I mean, over time, when the federal regulations change, and we can have a normal supply chain like any other industry, where you grow something in California and you can ship it to
like
any other
wines
state,
or anything.
just like your strawberries and blueberries that you go buy at whatever grocery store you shop at, right? They're getting grown on the West Coast, and they're on the East Coast, 24 hours later, right? On a
And
shelf.
do you think it's going to take 10 years, give or take? That's the prediction of the industry. Not you, maybe Greg, but would love to hear a personal point of view. But people think about 10 up to 10 years.
I mean, I think the expectation is not going to happen during this administration. So we're at least 5 years out probably, and so hopefully sometime between 5 and 10 years. And then even though it federally legalizes, what does that look like? Does that mean I can make a gummy in California and ship it to New York, or I could grow flower in California and ship it to New York? I can grow, as a finished product, or I can grow it as a raw material and ship it to a manufacturer in New York. There could be different phase-ins of different pieces, because there's a lot of money and employment, which is tax money as well, in each state, based on these billions of dollars that have been spent to build infrastructure and facilities to grow that in a normal supply chain we wouldn't have done, with an agricultural product in places where it doesn't make sense to grow it.
So I'm sorry for suppressing a very fun conversation. I thought it's going to be fun. Then we talk about all the challenges. Who is the unicorn of this industry? Who is that under the circumstances, under all those challenging things? Who's the one you look? Is it Snoop Dogg, or who is the person is beyond just being a great ambassador to this? It financially succeeded, doing very well. Is there someone like that?
There's not a lot of good examples right now. We're still early days. I think the roll of the dice, the reading the tea leaves, the crystal ball of who are going to be the winners. You could look at the public companies, and you pick a handful of those public companies based on whatever financial metric you want to you want to look at and say today they're the healthiest and therefore theoretically they could be the winners. But we could look back 3 or 4 years ago and have done that same metric, and some of those companies don't exist anymore, and some of them had multi-billion-dollar valuations, tens of billions of valuations, and now they've got small hundreds of millions of or less valuations,
Yeah.
or they're not even in business, right? So I think
That's a real look. You said it's here. You're jumping back and forth, which is how you got to look at it. But I want to look from your perspective, from your business side perspective. You say, look, we're an early industry. We've only been around as a quote unquote more legitimized industry for 12 years, 13 years, right? Yes, I totally get it. Historically, fine. If we look back 100 years, they'd be like, here's the path. But for an investor, if you told me, good boss, write a check for $1 million investing in industry that's going to be failing for 20 years and only then it's going to do well, I'm like, I'm not going to this industry. Like, this is a very, very long tail. How do you deal with it? So someone who raised money, who been in this industry for so long.
Yeah, I mean, the financial markets have dried up significantly. It's difficult to raise capital in the market right now. Many companies raised a lot of debt to build out the infrastructure that they needed, and a lot of that debt's coming due, and we're going to see some more blood in the water, I think, over the next 12 to 18 months because of some of that, which means consolidation will take place, and which is healthy in the industry long term.
Yeah.
It's just it's painful in the short term. The public companies use the Canadian markets to because you couldn't go public in the States, and so they use the Canadian exchanges.
The tariff right now going to impact that also?
The tariff doesn't really no, because we're not moving. You can't move product across border.
So it's
right?
registered in Canada, but it's not like you're making the product in Canada.
No,
because you
right.
can't move it across
They're a public company in Canada,
borders.
but operating whatever. So these companies, like, is a good example. Constellation, which is one of the biggest liquor distribution and liquor brands in the world, at the height of the Canadian market, and the number one company in Canada at the time, which they put a $4 billion investment into, and the company had a $16 billion valuation. That company now has about a $230 million market cap, right? So
complete failure. I mean, number-wise,
right?
complete
Right?
failure.
But they're still
16 billion valuation to 200 million.
Right.
It's basically non-existing. It's off
Right.
the shelf now.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But it's still one of the largest companies in Canada, right? And they've got operations through some collaborations in the States and potential, and in Europe, et cetera, right? So still viable, but when those market collapses, and we've seen it across dozens and dozens and dozens of companies, that's just one example because they were the high flyer, but you could pick a bunch of them and see exactly the same trend and just didn't have the same number of zeros on it.
So so to answer, to make simple the question I asked, there's no unicorns. There's no someone who is like crazy successful. Maybe there's someone who's a little better. So you've been supporting business people, innovators for many, many years. If I said to you, look, I want to go into this industry, would you say to me, don't do it? Would you say to me, or if I said to you, I hear you, I shouldn't do it now, but I still want to do it. From your perspective, because you have a very broad exposure to this industry, what is the best place to be in? Is it in the consumption, in the marketing? Is it in the agriculture? Which one is it?
Yeah, and definitely I would say if you want to do it, don't do it. But
so you don't think it's a good industry to go into?
No, I listen.
Well, you're in it, right? So
there's always opportunities, right? So again, why are we focused on brand right now? Because our belief is brands are going to be where some of the winning takes place. Just like we saw in liquor, right? It wasn't in the farmer that was making the raw materials for whiskey. It was the guy who owned Seagram's, right? And so I think we think about it the same way. It's about brands. It's about shelf space. It's about pull through. It's about footprint of that shelf space across as many markets as you can be in that are legal, et cetera, so that when it does go legal, and the major CPG companies have cover to come play in the space, which they will, then is it buy or build? Some will build, and we expect that some will buy, and they'll go buy brands that have presence and that they can then leverage their distribution systems, right? So I mean that's brands are one place to do that. Um, there's going to be a bunch of consolidation in the marketplace, and there's going to be a bunch of releveraging and rebalancing of balance sheets and
So
debts.
where is the opportunity? Is the opportunity
So the
you
opportunity
for
there is going to be that there's many of the folks that were in the venture capital space, um, early private equity space, are now in the distressed investment space.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
looking at hard assets. They're looking at there's a bunch of companies that have started in sort of the real estate REIT sale leaseback space. They're still going to be to infrastructure, right? And then the question is on a retail perspective, are you when it federally legalizes, are you going to be able to go into the local C store, liquor store and buy it? Maybe not. So, those the major retail chains, so where which
Walmart, you mean
are
the
probably
Walmart or the Costco, yeah.
right. So, who's got the CVS of the, as an example, right? Because it's probably not going to be over the counter, at least initially for, at CVS and Walgreens, and it's not going to be in Costco, and it's not going to be right. So, those the people that have the major footprints from a retail perspective, or the ones that are in the process of rolling those things up and putting them together and creating national footprints for retail, or, also, people are looking at and say, okay, who's going to be, to your point, your question, who's going to be the unicorn or who's going to be the winner, who are going to be the winners in those spaces? If brands and if retail's the toll booth, you have to go through it to get it. Who are the people that, whether they're private today and once we go federally legal, then we can take a public in the States.
And I
Or
think
who are the
brand
people
will be a big
today?
part of it, because if nationwide you can recognize, let's say, the dispensary that does very well one place and build an image or service, and they can go coast to coast, basically, you can recognize, because that's a big part of it. You can actually recognize the brand. You say, it's like a Starbucks. I walk in, I
Mhm.
know exactly what to expect. So, but right now it's not possible because you can open in different, yeah.
Right.
It's been fascinating, Greg, because it's such a I have such a different image of this industry. It seems to me, and again, correct me, and I'm not trying to suppress anyone. You're already in this industry for many years, but it seems like a sexy, cool, trendy marketing kind of industry. And because of regulation and bureaucracy and culture change, I would say also, like there's be a shift in culture, how we interact with it. It's a very long process. And in reality, it's a real, again, correct me if I'm using too bold of a statement, but it seems like a really struggling industry from the size it used to be when the kind of like the .com version of cannabis, to the, like, it's trying to find its own kind of footing. It's trying to find its own profitability, and the government and the environment doesn't make it easy for them.
Yeah,
You know,
I think it's going to be a very fascinating HBS case
case study exactly at Harvard,
10
exactly.
years or 15 years from now, in terms of looking at what, the first 25 years of the industry look like, as we went from, total illegal market to a fully legal market, not just in the US, but where things are trading internationally, and across borders like
Yeah.
any other, traditional CPG product. I think it's going to be a very fascinating case. And, this to your question of where are the opportunities, it's a strategy question today, right? If you could had a crystal ball 15 years from now, and you could dial back and say, okay, who are the winners going to be? Who are the unicorns going to be? Who put the pieces of the puzzle together that made that investment opportunity? Again, I'd go back and say a good place to go study would be go look at the liquor companies and who were the winners in the 50s and the 60s, 1950s and 1960s, of what came out 25 and 30 years before that, and how did that progress, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we can take a look at today at the major liquor companies that came out of those prohibitionist days and see who the winners were.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's when people go
I
out
want to
and
end
did
it.
it.
Yeah. I want to end on a personal note, on a personal question. So, you had, I'm assuming, okay, so correct me. if I'm wrong, you were very excited. There were times maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago, you're like, I'm good. I'm going into the industry. I've seen many, because you always work with early stages. So you saw successes, but you also saw probably many, many failures. But there were times probably you're like, I'm going to double on this one. This is going to be the next thing. There'll be the next alcohol, whatever the next medical breakthrough. And the reality is you're in an industry that is struggling. So how personally do you deal with that expectation, attachment, and then the reality hitting you?
I'm an eternal optimist for sure. And I do believe that, I mean, it's the same, that if we're going to go from a $50 billion market to a $300 billion market over the next 10 years, there's opportunity. There's tremendous opportunity. It's being strategic about it. It's not being emotional about it. It's being resilient and being able to persevere,
It's probably
right?
has been difficult, right? It's been
For
there's
sure.
moments when you're like, maybe I should use my product because I'm like really depressed about it. Maybe I should, it must be very challenging, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely got its challenges on a consistent basis. Many of the people we partner with have their challenges, as well, because of the nature of the environment. We can't control our supply chain in all the states that we do business in. It's too expensive, right? We have to partner with other people, and they have their challenges too, right? So, um, yeah, it's not about having an expectation that tomorrow it's all gonna be on the other side of the equation, right? I mean, it's a business. This is not tie dye and Birkenstocks like we started the conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a business, which is why you see a bunch of people in shirts and ties, and the investment bankers are around the table, and the New York
Yeah.
guys are doing their thing.
If they
And
survive, if they stick around for long enough, Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you just have to,
Fascinating.
have to have a belief in, and it's about marketing, and it's about brand building, and it's about supply chain, and it's about economies of scale, and it's about being very, very efficient and effective in terms of how you run your business. The
No
early days,
different than running a coffee shop chain or anything like
right?
that. I mean,
Exactly right.
I
I
think
mean,
that's one of the things I learned today is like I had this assumption that it's a much looser, fun maybe, or not fun, but like like a marketing kind of almost like the clothing industry, a lot of image and what's trendy, but it seems to actually it's hardcore brick and mortar from a business perspective, business planning perspective of supply chain. Uh, Investors, future prediction, regulation, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be, right? I mean, in the early days of each state, when you could, a pound of weed, as an example, selling in the legal marketplace through the various products, is going for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a pound into the normal supply chain. And now that same product is going out to the marketplace for 700, 800, 900. And the ability to be loose and not be tight on your operations in the early days was there.
Yeah.
Today,
Well,
unless you're a really, really sophisticated operator with really tight controls, just like in any business, right? And you're not going to succeed. You're going to be out of business, because the compression of the retail price and the wholesale price in the marketplace has been so dramatic that unless you're really, really tight on your operations, and you're really
yeah.
watching all the metrics, and you're really measuring everything, you're not gonna survive.
Well, Greg, you succeeded making cannabis unsexy, and very, very well done. I mean, actually, it was a fascinating conversation about business, but definitely unsexy. I'm not going into this industry, but thank you for being with us. It's really great. You're such an expert, and you come from the right place and with so much knowledge about business. So thank you. Great conversation. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, playbook. We're going to make it very simple today. So look at your environment and ask, is it a match to what you're up to? And what do I mean by that? Again, very simple question, but really fundamental, because we do have two conversations, right? We have a conversation with ourselves. Am I good enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I, successful at what I'm doing? That's one conversation. But the other one is the environment in relationship to you. What do I mean by that? If you're kitchen cabinet is full of candy and junk food, and you say you're really committed to health and fitness, there's a huge gap there. The environment is not there to support you in what you're up to. So look at your desk as a business owner. Is the desk reflecting what you're up to? If it's messy, full of papers, full of notes and just dirty, basically, with stuff, that's a reflection of how you're running your business. So the more you're going to set up your environment to reflect and to show what you're up to, the easier it's going to get for you to do other stuff. Because look, running a task, running a business, running something you're really committed to is difficult to start with. You're going to constantly have challenges. But if the environment around you is not set for you to win, it's going to be even more difficult. So this week, just take 3 things, 3 areas of your life when you really committed to have an extraordinary result, to be a top performer, and look at them and say, is the environment around me, is my kitchen cabinet, is my desk, is my closet reflects what I'm up to? And if not, go and fix it. When you create an environment around you that actually supports you, it gets easier. Then you only have to deal with the other problems and the other challenges, but the environment itself creates you a space of success. That's Playbook.